In the early morning light, shadows stretch through weathered stone arches like fingers reaching across 2 millennia. Tourists from every corner of the world gather here, cameras capturing what they can, voices blending in a dozen different languages. Yet if one pauses for just a moment, allowing the sounds of modern Rome to fade, something else emerges from the silence. The thunderous roar of 50,000 spectators, the crack of whips, the clash of steel on steel, the primal calls of exotic beasts. This is the Colosseum, where stone and blood wrote one of history's most extraordinary stories, where an empire's greatest ambitions and darkest impulses played out beneath the Mediterranean sun. These are far more than ancient ruins. We stand in the very heart of Rome, positioned between the Palatine and Esquiline hills, at what has become the ultimate symbol of the Roman Empire, perhaps of the entire ancient world. 6 million people journey here annually, driven by something deeper than mere curiosity. This is the largest amphitheater ever constructed, a monument to our enduring fascination with spectacle, power, and that precarious boundary between civilization and savagery. For Italians, it represents national pride incarnate. For the world, it offers a window into an empire that fundamentally shaped what we call Western civilization. Yet the story begins not with glory, but with the ashes of one emperor's megalomaniacal dreams. Where gladiators once fought and died, there existed an artificial lake, the centerpiece of Emperor Nero's Domus Aurea, the Golden House. This palace was so extravagantly excessive, it consumed nearly a third of Rome. Nero diverted an entire aqueduct to fill his private paradise, complete with a 120-foot bronze statue of himself portrayed as the sun god. When the Great Fire devastated Rome in 64 AD, whispers spread that Nero himself had orchestrated the catastrophe to clear space for his architectural fantasies. Whether true or not, this golden house became the perfect symbol of imperial excess that ordinary Romans despised. In 68 AD, Nero took his own life, ending the Julio-Claudian dynasty. The Flavian emperors who succeeded him, Vespasian, followed by his sons Titus and Domitian, understood precisely what needed to be done. They would win back the people's loyalty with a masterful stroke, tear down Nero's monument to selfishness, and return the land to the people in the most spectacular manner imaginable.
To understand the Colosseum, one must first comprehend the Rome that created it. This was a city of over 1 million souls, the largest in the ancient world, a sprawling metropolis where extraordinary wealth existed alongside grinding poverty. The narrow streets teemed with humanity, Syrian merchants hawking silk, Germanic slaves hauling enormous amphorae, Egyptian priests in pristine linen robes, Jewish scholars debating philosophy, all navigating this labyrinth of 7-story tenements. The aroma was intoxicating. Fresh bread from public bakeries mingling with the odors of the Cloaca Maxima. Exotic spices from distant lands blending with incense from countless temples. This empire stretched from Hadrian's Wall to the Sahara Desert, from the Atlantic to the Euphrates, all feeding into this magnificent, chaotic metropolis. Yet Rome's greatest challenge was not governing those distant provinces. It was keeping their own people content. The urban masses, the plebs, wielded genuine political power when they chose to exercise it. They could riot, overthrow emperors, reduce the city to ashes. Astute rulers learned quickly. Provide what they desire. Subsidized grain to nourish their bodies. spectacular entertainment to captivate their spirits. The Colosseum was Rome's answer to both, a temple to spectacle that would make the people adore their emperor and forget their troubles, at least for a few blood-soaked hours.
Vespasian ordered Nero's lake drained and began construction of what would become the Flavian amphitheater around 70 AD. This was masterful politics wrapped in extraordinary engineering. The message was unmistakable. Where a despised emperor once indulged his private pleasures, the people would now receive their entertainment, entirely free of charge. Construction proceeded with remarkable speed for such a monumental project, what would require decades today. When Vespasian died in 79 AD, his son Titus completed the work and inaugurated the arena with games lasting 100 days. The death toll from these opening festivities, both human and animal, was staggering, a preview of the carnage to come. Titus died just 2 years later, and his brother Domitian added the underground Hypogeum and finishing touches. Together, they had created the greatest entertainment complex the world had ever witnessed. Approaching this colossus in its prime would have been breathtaking. Rising 157 feet into the Roman sky, this elliptical giant stretched 620 feet long and 513 feet wide, roughly the dimensions of a modern football stadium, yet completely enclosed. The exterior was a masterpiece of Roman architectural hierarchy. Simple Doric columns adorning the ground floor, Ionic on the second story, Corinthian on the third, while the fourth presented a solid wall with Corinthian pilasters. Every detail reinforced social order. The arena itself was constructed from travertine limestone, quarried in Tivoli and transported by thousands of slaves and oxen. Roman concrete, that revolutionary mixture incorporating volcanic ash that enabled their engineering marvels, bound everything together. The genius lay in the details. 80 entrances allowed massive crowds to enter and exit efficiently, a challenge that still confronts modern stadium designers. The seating arrangement strictly reflected Roman social hierarchy. Senators and dignitaries occupied seats closest to the action, followed by the equestrian class, then ordinary citizens, with women and slaves relegated to the uppermost reaches. Everyone understood their place, and the architecture ensured they remained there. The most impressive engineering lay beneath the arena floor. The Hypogeum, literally meaning underground, was an extraordinary labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and mechanical marvels that would astound modern special effects crews. This vast subterranean complex housed holding cells for gladiators and wild animals, plus a sophisticated system of elevators and pulleys operated by teams of slaves. Trapdoors could open anywhere on the arena floor, and suddenly elephants, lions, or armed fighters would appear as if by magic. The Romans even installed a retractable canvas roof called the Velarium, operated by sailors from the imperial fleet who understood rigging. On sunny days, it provided shade for the spectators, though notably not for those performing below. The acoustics were designed with such precision that even a whisper from the arena floor could be heard in the uppermost seats. One can hardly imagine standing in that arena, surrounded by 50,000 Romans. It must have felt like being trapped within a human hurricane.
A day at the games would begin before dawn, with anticipation and dread stirring in one's stomach. Even spectators understood they were about to witness something profound and terrible. By sunrise, thousands would stream toward the arena, the fortunate clutching wooden tokens marked with their seat numbers. The morning program commenced with venationes, wild animal hunts that were part spectacle, part wholesale slaughter. Exotic beasts from across the empire paraded before the crowd. African elephants and rhinoceros, Caspian tigers, North African lions, bears from the Germanic forests.
Professional hunters, the venatores, would demonstrate their skills while the crowd erupted in approval. Yet this transcended mere entertainment. It was imperial propaganda made manifest. Every exotic creature represented a corner of the empire, Rome's dominance over the natural world rendered visible. The scent of sawdust mingling with blood would begin to fill the air. By midday, under the merciless Roman sun, the atmosphere would shift dramatically. The intermission entertainment often featured public executions, criminals fed to beasts or forced to fight without weapons or training. Justice and spectacle merged into something that satisfied the crowd's bloodlust while reinforcing imperial law. Spectators might avert their gaze or find themselves joining the chorus of approval. The arena possessed a way of transforming people. The gladiatorial world was far more sophisticated than modern perception suggests. Each type of gladiator possessed specific weapons, armor, and fighting techniques refined through centuries of lethal trial and error. The Murmillo wore heavy armor and carried a large rectangular shield and gladius sword, essentially designed to fight like a Roman legionnaire. His opponent might be a retiarius, the net fighter, armed only with trident, weighted net, and dagger, yet possessing remarkable speed and agility. These were not random encounters, but carefully choreographed contests between entirely different fighting philosophies. Some gladiators fought mounted, the equites, while others, the Essidarii, battled from chariots like ancient Celtic warriors. The bestiarii specialized in combating wild animals, developing techniques passed down through generations of men who had learned to read the body language of leopards and understand the charging patterns of rhinoceroses. Each gladiator school, or ludus, jealously guarded its training secrets. New recruits spent months learning not merely how to fight, but how to die with dignity when the crowd delivered that fatal thumbs down. Ultimately, the arena rewarded not just weapons mastery, but theatrical skill. The finest gladiators understood they were performing roles in Rome's greatest drama, that eternal struggle between civilization and chaos, courage and cowardice, life and death.
The Romans had a phrase, panem et circenses, bread and circuses. Keep the masses fed and entertained, and they will not revolt. The games transcended mere entertainment. They were instruments of power, control, legitimacy. History has preserved the names of truly legendary fighters who became household names throughout the empire. Priscus and Verus fought an epic match during those inaugural games. Both men displayed such skill and courage that Emperor Titus declared them both victors and granted them freedom simultaneously. This was almost unprecedented. Carpophorus, the extraordinary beast hunter, once killed the bear, a lion, and a leopard in successive single combats during the same afternoon. Yet perhaps no gladiator captured Roman imagination quite like Emperor Commodus himself, who insisted on fighting in the arena, typically against handicapped opponents or wild animals with clipped claws and dull teeth. His 735 recorded victories were fraudulent, but they represented something deeper. Even the most powerful man in the world craved that unique arena glory. The gladiator schools themselves became centers of intrigue and drama. The Ludus Magnus, connected to the Colosseum by underground tunnel, housed hundreds of fighters in Spartan barracks. Trainers, called doctores, were often former gladiators who had won their freedom and now imparted their lethal knowledge. The finest fighters lived like athletes, massaged, fed specialized diets, given medical attention superior to what most Romans could expect. They formed bonds of brotherhood forged in blood, knowing today's training partner might be tomorrow's opponent. Some maintained romantic relationships that scandalized proper Roman society. Graffiti discovered in Pompeii reveals that gladiator admirers were indeed real.
Women of all social classes fantasizing about these dangerous, charismatic men who danced with death for public entertainment.
Yet we must not romanticize what transpired here. The numbers are both staggering and sobering. Modern historians estimate that over the Colosseum's 4 centuries of games, hundreds of thousands perished within these walls. Gladiators, criminals, prisoners of war, volunteers seeking glory or wealth. The animal toll was even more devastating. Entire species were driven to extinction or near extinction to satisfy Rome's appetite for exotic spectacle. North African elephants, Caspian tigers, European lions, all vanished from vast regions as hunters scoured the empire to stock the arena. Trajan's games celebrating his conquest of Dacia lasted 123 days and killed 11,000 animals and 10,000 fighters. Those opening games under Titus destroyed 9,000 animals in a single day. These were not merely statistics. Each represented a life, a family, a community somewhere in the empire paying the price for Roman entertainment. The arena transformed death into theater, suffering into spectacle. It stands as a reminder of how easily civilizations can normalize brutality when it serves their entertainment or political needs.
The end came not with dramatic finality, but gradual decline. As the Roman Empire weakened, the games became increasingly expensive and politically irrelevant. The last recorded gladiatorial contest occurred in 435 AD, though animal hunts continued sporadically into the 6th century. Christianity's rise certainly played a role. Church leaders consistently condemned the games as immoral, but economics and politics mattered more. Maintaining this vast infrastructure, procuring exotic animals, training gladiators, it required resources the declining empire simply could not afford. Earthquakes in 847 and 1349 AD severely damaged the structure. Rather than repair it, Romans began treating the Colosseum as a quarry, stripping away marble seats and decorative elements to build churches and palaces. For centuries, it served as housing for ordinary families, workshops for artisans, even a fortress for Roman nobles. Vegetation grew from its arches, animals nested in its tunnels, and this arena that once echoed with human drama became home to an entirely different kind of wildness.
The Renaissance awakened European interest in classical antiquity, and the Colosseum began its transformation from forgotten ruin to celebrated monument. Artists sketched its romantic decay, writers composed odes to its vanished glory, and grand tour travelers made pilgrimages here to contemplate the rise and fall of empires. The Catholic Church, embracing the Christian martyrdom narrative, declared it sacred ground in 1749 and began stabilization efforts. The 19th century brought more systematic restoration work, clearing centuries of accumulated debris and vegetation. UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site in 1980, recognizing not merely its architectural significance, but its role in human cultural memory. Today, the Colosseum welcomes over 6 million visitors annually, making it one of Italy's most popular destinations. Standing here today, as shadows lengthen across these ancient stones, we confront uncomfortable questions about ourselves and our societies. The Romans were not monsters. They were people, much like us, with families, hopes, fears, moral codes. Yet they created and sustained an institution that transformed human suffering into mass entertainment. They cheered as people died, and they called it civilization. This compels us to examine, what spectacles do we create and consume? What violence do we normalize in the name of entertainment or politics? How do we use grand gestures to distract from systemic problems? Just as emperors used aims to divert attention from economic inequality and political oppression. The Colosseum's enduring fascination lies not merely in its architectural grandeur or historical significance. It rests in its mirror-like quality. It reflects both humanity's capacity for breathtaking achievement and our troubling appetite for spectacle, our ability to build wonders, and our willingness to fill them with horror. Perhaps this explains why 6 million people make the pilgrimage here each year, not simply to observe ancient stones, but to grapple with these timeless questions about civilization, power, and the price of entertainment. Those echoes of ancient crowds have long since faded, but the questions they raise about who we are and who we choose to become will resonate as long as humans gather to watch, to cheer, and to judge. The Colosseum stands not merely as a monument to Roman engineering, but as an eternal reminder that the distance between civilization and savagery is often shorter than we would care to believe.